The long-awaited ceasefire between Hamas and Israel went into force on Sunday, which was followed by the first exchange of detainees by the two parties. The ceasefire and the process of releasing the prisoners will continue over the next 3 months. It has already caused discontent among far-right members of Binyamin Netanyahu's Israeli government, but for now the release of the two first hostages has been welcomed in Israel. And for more on this, I'm joined by Oliver McTernan, founder and director of Forward Thinking, a charity that works for conflict resolution and mediation in the Middle East. Good morning, Oliver. Thanks for joining us. The ceasefire is holding for now. Can this be considered a success?
Well, I think it's too early to use the word success. I think it is extremely fragile. I got a video this morning from Gaza showing a child being shot dead in Rafah by Israeli military sniper. I think the risk at the moment in this fragile situation and not clearly defined situation, who is responsible for what, I think the real risk is that there will be spoilers both on the Israeli side who are opposed to it, even in the military, and also in Gaza, people who had benefited from the chaos previously, now, trying to revert back to the chaotic situation that we witnessed over the past 450 odd days.
Now, you mentioned spoilers there, and one of those is more than likely going to be the Israeli far right, who have been saying quite vocally in the past couple of days that this ceasefire and the hostage prisoner exchange deal is a terrible deal for Israel. Why is this?
Well, I think it's an ideological mindset. Right at the beginning of the war, way back in November 23, I met several members of the right, not just in Ben Gvir's party and Smotrich's party, but also in Likud, who saw October the 7th as an opportunity to introduce, in their words, the third Commonwealth. And they described that as the first Commonwealth. Solomon had the tribes around in Hebron. David consolidated around the temple in Jerusalem. That was the kingdom. And then the third Commonwealth would be this, from the river to the sea, in their words, a Jewish state, fulfilling what they saw as the prophecies. So I think that ideology has been a driving factor. And the hope was that the Egyptians would open the border, Gazans would be resettled in the Sinai, they would clear out the West Bank to Jordan, and then they would pacify the North by bringing America into war with Tehran. Now, that was explained, as I put it, but without any embarrassment and with bewilderment, seeing that we couldn't see this as an important opportunity.
And more generally in Israeli society, there is rejoicing at the moment for the return of hostages, but there is also an imbalance in the number of detainees being released. I mean, about 30 Palestinians for each Israeli. In the coming months, could that turn out to be a problem?
Well, I think it will be a problem, and it was certainly after the number way back in 2011, when over 1,000 Palestinians were released for the release of Gilad Shalit. There were people then saying this is wrong, and people have held that position all along. I think what is lacking in understanding in Israeli society is that a large number of detainees are held without trial. There's the administrative detention, they go through military courts, they're put in without really the sort of legal representation and so forth, and the scrutiny that one would expect. So that's one aspect. They're seen as terrorists. There's a natural, understandable fear, and therefore, what are we doing by releasing them? I think that will always be there. It'll always be a cause of pressure on whoever is in power in Israel. But, if I may explain, when I was doing the Shalit deal, what was explained to me, the reason why the Palestinian resistance groups, Hamas or whatever, took Israeli hostages, and in particular then it was only military, they were seen as a way of getting the Israeli legal system to review Palestinian cases. They said that in the past, when you were detained or without trial, or you went through a trial, your case would be up for review. When that system was abolished, there was no chance of people with multiple life sentences ever having their cases reviewed and therefore ever coming out of prison. So the way to do it, and I'm not in explaining it, let me make clear, I'm not endorsing it, I'm trying to create a sort of understanding of what's going on. In the Palestinian mindset, the way to pressurize the Israelis to review cases was to hold a hostage. Now, one of the pleas at the Shalit deal was to reintroduce the system of reviews of Palestinian prisoners and therefore stop this hostage taking. Sadly, that was not taken up.
Now, since Sunday, humanitarian aid has been getting through to Gaza, but observers say it's still much less than what needs to get through. What can the international community do to ensure that the people of Gaza get more aid?
The tragedy of the past year, I think, is the international community has proved itself to be totally impotent. No matter what it tries to do, no matter what big statements are made at the UN, or we've seen that the Netanyahu government has chosen totally to ignore it. It does what it wants because it is in control. I think there is only one person on the scene who can change that. And sadly, in the present world order, that is the American president. Now, President Biden failed miserably to do that over the past 15 months. It remains to be seen how directive Donald Trump will be.
Now, Donald Trump actually said yesterday that he doesn't think that the truce will hold, though he didn't specify when it might break down. Is this a signal that under Trump, the US is about to disengage from the conflict?
Well, I studied carefully all that was said last night. And what was coming out, I felt, was very much mixed messages. There was a lot of hope. I think Steve Witkoff, his opening remarks were very encouraging because he talked about this commitment to create a stability in the region, a stability between Israel and the Arab countries. He talked about a sustainable peace. Now, those were good things. But then Donald Trump, of course, said his proudest legacy would be to be a peacemaker and a unifier. But then he talked about his use of power and might, and that's worrying. You know, it'll depend, I think, how this new administration goes about. It's in the isolationism seems to be in the air, but at the same time, I think the Trump administration recognized that it is in America's economic interests to ensure that there is a peace in the what we call the Middle East Gulf region, and that will economically benefit the United States, because if the Saudi Arabians can be brought into the Abraham Accords, and they say the only way that will happen if there is a Palestinian state, end of occupation and Palestinian state. If they stick by that, and they are coming into the region, and we get a sustainable stability in the region, it will be an economic powerhouse that will benefit Trump's domestic policies in America, because it'll benefit his economy.
Now, it's fairly well known the love of the majority of the Israeli people for Donald Trump, but how do the Palestinians feel about Trump? Do they see him as going to be anything worse or better than Biden, or do you think it doesn't really matter who is in charge in Washington?
I think it's the latter, Oliver, that the Palestinians have long given up on hopes of an American president, having their interest. They will, and I think rightly see, it's always a domestic interest in America that dictates policies. I remember some years ago, before Obama took power, being part of a conference in which a very senior CIA analyst said to me, he said, keep in mind, it doesn't matter who the American president is. American foreign policy is driven essentially by domestic interests. And you sum up our domestic interests in one word, the economy. And he said, keep an eye on that and you'll get your understanding of what's happening in the region right.
Thank you very much for that, Oliver McTernan, the founder and director of Forward Thinking.